Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are discussing Hicks and Slutsky compensation variation method for understanding that how the income effect, price effect, and substitution effect concepts vary in the Hicks approach and the Slutsky approach. Now, to connect you with this topic, you remember that in the previous classes we have been discussing consumer behavior and using the indifference curve approach to understand this consumer behavior. Now this we are doing after understanding the straight line demand curve approach. Okay, and in this slide you can see the description of price effect, which can be decomposed into two types of effect: substitution effect and income effect. That means what you are saying is that every time there is a price change for a commodity, it can be divided into two types of effect. One is the substitution effect. So immediately as the price change, one commodity becomes cheaper and therefore the consumer starts consuming more of that commodity, and it is expected that consumer will substitute the cheaper commodity with the comparatively costlier commodity. So price of X has come down, so he will increase the consumption of X, decrease the consumption of Y, therefore substitution effect. Now, along with this decrease of price, what will happen is that real purchasing power, real income or purchasing power of the consumer will also increase. And that's how we call it income effect. So price effect, total price effect, that means decrease of price, will result in two types of effect. One is the substitution effect, the other is the income effect. Now in the previous classes, we have understood that how do we explain this effect. Okay, we all understand that due to substitution effect, we move from one point on the indifference curve to the another point of indifference curve. And with income effect, there is a parallel shift in the budget line, and therefore we move to a higher indifference curve. But now there are two economists who have tried to explain the same idea of price effect decomposition in the two different approaches. So let us see that approach. I have mentioned the one example here so that you can understand that how we are explaining the price effect substitution. Now this is the final diagram which will help you in understanding the difference between Hicks and Slutsky. Okay, but let me try out if I can show you this diagram, and if it comes completely, no, maybe not, but let us come back to this diagram. And you can see that on the left side you have the Hicks diagram, and on the right side you have the Slutsky diagram. Now try to pay attention to this. When you are trying to understand that how consumer makes choices when the price of, say, X commodity, for example, decreases. So see in the diagram, there is a point E1. E1 lies on indifference curve 1, which is tangent on the budget line AB1. Please pay attention to it. I'm repeating it. Budget line AB1, where the IC1 is tangent, and the tangency point is at E1. First, we are considering the E1 point, where the consumer is having a combination of X1 and some amount of Y, right? Now suppose the price of X decreases. So when the price of X decreases, the budget line will shift outwards on the X axis because only X price has decreased. So now the new budget line is AB2. Now with this price change, the first effect will be total price effect. Now the consumer moves to a higher indifference curve, that is IC2, and the equilibrium point is E3. Okay, but now Hicks says that suppose if we take away the increased income, real income, or the purchasing power. Why increased in purchasing power? Because X has become cheaper, therefore the consumer has more real income in his hands. So if we take it back from the consumer, then there will be a parallel shift in the budget line. Now the budget line after this parallel shift will be A3, B3. So Hicks says that once you take away the increased purchasing power, the consumer will be back on the indifference curve IC1, and the new equilibrium point will be E2, okay, where X is greater and it is substituted with Y. So now in this diagram, you understand that movement from E1 to E3 is the price effect, which can be decomposed into two types of effect, that is E1 E2 substitution effect plus E2 E3 income effect. Okay, now see the other diagram, that is the Slutsky diagram. How Slutsky is trying to explain the same thing. He says that whenever there is a price change and if the price decreases, the consumer should move at a higher IC, that is indifference curve or satisfaction level. So initial budget line AB1, initial equilibrium point E1. As the price decreases, the budget line shift outwards, that is AB2, the equilibrium point is E2. Now, if you take away the increased purchasing power from the consumer, there is a parallel shift in the budget line, that is A4, B4, backward shift because income is decreasing. But there is a new IC. As compared to Hicks, there is a new IC, that is IC2, and there is a new equilibrium point at IC3, at IC2 E3. Okay, so now E1 E2 is the price effect. From E1 to E3 it is substitution effect, and E3 to E2 is the income effect. So you can see that Slutsky uses three indifference curves to explain this approach, and Hicks uses two approaches, right? So just have a bit of reading of this, and then in the next class we'll try to understand it through an elaborated example. Okay, so and then if we are able to cover up your doubts in the next class, we will start with price consumption curve and income consumption curve. Thank you.